Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute here. We are allowing just a few more folks to get themselves settled and logged in. Thank you for your patience. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here today. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I know your role in communicating to your communities is an important one, and it's often a job that has atypical hours and demands. So finding time to spend with us is very much appreciated. And we're going to go ahead and jump right into things. So welcome today to Trolls and Their Toll on Social Media Communicators. And I'm proud to say today's presenter is Brandy Bates. Brandy Bates is a bit of an expert on trolls. She is the Santa Rosa County Public Information Officer. That's Santa Rosa County in Florida. An experienced local government public information officer. Huge history working in crisis communications, but also in the nonprofit and private sector. As you can see on your screen, does a lot for the Public Information Office. Also a graduate of FEMA's Master Public Information Officers Program. And I think pretty awesome that was also named the Public Relations Association Pensacola Area Chapter's Communicator of the Year for 2019. And in just a second, I'm going to be kicking things over to Brandy. But before I do, I want to go over a couple of quick housekeeping rules for everybody. So first of all, there is a huge number of you here today, a lot of submitted questions, but we have put you on mute. You do have an opportunity to ask questions live during the event using the questions feature of GoToWebinar. I will let you know more than 60 questions were submitted in advance, which is awesome, shows the high interest in the content. We're going to try to tackle a couple of those at the end of the presentation, but the good news is the vast majority of them are actually answered during the presentation itself. And I want to let everybody know who's in attendance, you will receive the slides, a recorded copy of the webinar, and Brandy also has a resource she's created, a one-pager cheat sheet, if you will, that we're also going to provide for you. So don't worry, you'll get the slides, you'll get a recording, and you'll get one of the resources we'll feature. And then the rest of it will give you an opportunity to sort of raise your hand if you'd like some additional information. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Brandy. And Brandy, so thanks for joining us today. As I mentioned, we got a lot of folks interested to learn about trolls. And I think now more than ever, as more people are home and there's a lot more sort of happening in our environments, they happen to feel a little bit more prevalent right now. You have some firsthand experience dealing with trolls, and we're going to dig into that a little later. But first, I want to sort of build a foundation for our attendees. And I've heard you refer to social media as sort of being a double-edged tool, meaning there's benefit, but there's consequences with it. Can you share some perspective on that with the audience?
Sure, Brian, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. For social media managers and public information officers, pretty much at all times, you're carrying this incredible little device in your hands that will help you get engaging content to a large number of people in very little time and almost no cost. Just with a few clicks, you can make a post that can inform and engage your followers, and then they can share this and you can expand your reach exponentially. And with just a little bit of money, you can boost that and get even more people interested in what the information you're sending out. Quick little side tip, don't boost a post right away. I always like to let it cool off, because once you boost a post, you can't edit it. So if you made a typo, you're going to share that with a lot of people and not be able to fix it. Social media also gives you really good insight, not just on how many people you're giving your message to, but how they are reacting to that message, which is great. So then if you need to adjust that messaging, you can do so. And one of my favorite things about social media is it really humanizes government. It gives people a chance to see and relate to you like a person rather than a faceless agency. You actually can show some personality. When I give presentations about our county to people, I like to remind the audience that government's not made out of robots. It's made out of people, friends and families and relatives, especially in a close-knit community like Santa Rosa County. Almost every one of our residents knows somebody that works for us, and it's nice to share a little bit of personality with people on social media. So that's the good part of social media.
Yeah, and you mentioned your county, Santa Rosa County in Florida, and it is no stranger to crises this year. Like all of us, 2020 is bringing a lot of curveballs, but you've had your fair share in the past few months or few weeks, I should say. I mean, you guys have dealt with hurricanes, you have dealt with the crisis communication around COVID, like everybody else is dealing with, and protests. But you've also been dealing with some forest fires as well. So, can you share some perspective on ways your team has sort of been handling their communication in these little crises? Because you guys have been navigating a lot, and I think what you've been dealing with is probably not too different than what others are dealing with.
Right. Yeah. I have been kind of thinking of COVID as this hurricane that's hit the entire country at once, pretty much. Every PIO is dealing with this right now. And unlike your standard 8-hour office day, social media is 24/7, 365, and it's accessible from couches to cars to everywhere. It just never stops. And big wildfires like we had last month, the citizens have constant attention online, and a lot of our social media users expected that we would answer questions around the clock, and that was difficult for us. We learned the hard way that monitoring social media as soon as you get up in the morning, which was like 5 during that, and as soon as you go to sleep, which was like 11 or midnight, it can burn you out really quickly. So it's very important for your team to create a schedule for monitoring media with a lot of downtime, because otherwise it's really going to affect your well-being. And it's also really important for your leadership to appreciate this time and energy that is requiring you and your team to monitor a platform that never sleeps. I think that's an important step towards improving the working conditions for a social media manager, especially during emergencies. In Florida here, well, actually anybody who's on the coast, um, most of us, and we do here, we have a team of employees from other departments in the county. Librarians are usually really good to pull from, that we have trained to assist us in the PIO office. And I did not hesitate to reach out for help during COVID and during the wildfire. We also had a couple of employees that I know that are really active on social media groups. And a lot of times we're so busy monitoring. We have like 17 Facebook pages, Twitter, some Instagram. We have a lot of followers on Nextdoor. So the PIO team was so busy monitoring that we didn't have time to be in the 30-something concerned citizens of your community kind of group. So I enlisted the help of several other people who don't work in PIO just to tell me what was going on in these groups. It wasn't just a force multiplier for my office. It also kept us from having to read through hundreds of posts, some of which can be really negative and just really wear your team down.
And we're going to get into sort of how to handle some of that negative stuff, but you guys did some really fantastic work, and we'll call it pushing the positive. You want to talk a little
Yeah,
bit about that as well?
now's really the time to, you've got their attention right now. So now's the time to push the positive messaging. And people really need to feel protected during a crisis. And public safety is one of government's biggest job. So knowing that government's working hard to keep them safe, despite all the challenges that are going on with a pandemic or a fire, that's an important message to get across to your people. And PIOs know that in the blue skies events, which is when everything's going great, it's hard to get the attention of the public. But when you have a gray skies event like a hurricane or a tornado or wildfire or pandemic or tropical storm, your posts get a lot more attention. And public information is all about getting the right information to the right people at the right time so they can make the right decision. And it's also a good idea, while you've got their attention, to push out the positives. During COVID, because so many people were working from home and staying at home and kids were out of school, We had a lot of road and bridge projects that were fast-tracked. We made a whole lot of improvements on our parks because they were relatively empty, and our pier because it was closed. And these were really good positive stories we were able to push out to the people to let them know, while you're staying safer at home, your government's continuing to work, and you're going to have all these great things once things start to relax and we can come back out. So good news stories don't always get much engagement. This is the time to push it. We've also been pushing a lot of hurricane preparedness. So, while you're preparing for a pandemic, also now is the time to start preparing for hurricanes.
You want to talk a little bit about your Unity and Community initiative as well?
Early on in the COVID response, we reached out to our partner agencies, law enforcement, EMS, fire, dispatch. We had them shoot their own socially distanced Unity and Community video clip. We provided them with some graphics. We pieced it together and shared it online to show people how we were working to keep the county safe during the crisis. And this was really helpful when, we had a tornado and then a wildfire. It was also helpful that, we had law enforcement in here, and we're very fortunate. Our law enforcement has a good relationship with our residents. So Santa Rosa County's not seen the protests that a lot of the other communities have had. And one of the coolest things that came out of this, and we look for silver linings everywhere and share them as much as possible, but in anticipation of our employee shortages, we thought, we might have shortages due to COVID. We put out this appeal for adopters and fosters. And the most amazing thing happens, and it still gives me chills. We cleared our animal shelter out for the first time in 25 years. So now the staff had the time to get to much needed training. They had time to stock up a surgical suite. We reached out to our followers and asked them to share photos of them working at home with their pets, which was a really good way to engage the public. And I think it helped them feel less alone. I think improving mental health of people was important. So we also created a post to share with people about where they can go for free counseling. And then we made this fun post about 25 things you can do at home instead of just obsessing over the news. And this got a really good response. My team and I had a really fun time putting this together. So it might take a little brainstorming for you to do, but you put something out like this and people appreciate it. People don't care what you know until they know that you care. So it's important to remind them that you care about them, their health and their safety and their well-being.
So I think it was so important we started there before we got into the meat of sort of why people are here today to learn more about how to respond to trolls. So when I hear you talk, Brandy, I think about how intentional your team is about making sure to, like you said, the blue skies, it's hard to get attention. We're in gray skies, we got their attention. What can we do to push the positive of everything we're doing? And you're so intentional and well-intended, but yet at the same time, we can engage with the community that maybe we weren't expecting to attract, right? We can attract a unique audience online, from the positive, which is what we're aiming for, to the downright malintended. So I'd love to sort of pivot from this foundation we built on social media and pushing the positive and talk a little bit about what are the types of people we actually end up running into online, despite all our intentions on our postings.
Well, it basically boils down to about 5 groups. First of all is your supporters. Thank goodness for your supporters. They're the ones who encourage their friends to follow you. They share your posts on their pages, usually with good comments. So I like to thank them or like their comments and keep them happily engaged. They are awesome. But you also have your...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, your next group. I'll let you go from here, sure.
Your critics. And critics are the ones that, and sometimes they have the best of intentions. They point out what they think are your mistakes, and they point out typos. We always thank them for their feedback and we fix the typo, but sometimes the mistakes they think that they're pointing out, really they're wrong. So it's important to very gently correct them so they can save face. People might forget what you say or you do, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. So we try to be very careful about correcting them. This particular post, the guy ended up emailing back and saying that he appreciated what we did. So you also have your upset followers. And the kind of good thing about upset followers is if they have a legitimate complaint and you address their situation quickly and help them out, a lot of times you'll turn them into a supporter, which is what happened in this particular case. A lot of times people just don't understand something, and you may not realize that. You get the chance to explain something to them, and a lot of times you end up turning them around. And then you also have complainers, and they're annoying. Um, if you go and look at their own page, you'll see this is the kind of stuff they do. You really can't do a whole lot with these complainers. You just, if you address their comments, you kind of validate them, and then they might just keep coming along. We tend to just ignore the complainers. And then you have haters. Haters hate your organization, or possibly they hate you personally. With haters, we're going to ignore them or hide their comments, which our policy allows for, and we'll talk a little bit more about social media policies in a second. Or, this is my favorite one, we let it self-moderate and let our supporters deal with them. So a lot of times our supporters have our back, and then we'll jump on them. And then you've got trolls. Trolls make personal attacks. They deliberately enjoy provoking you or your followers. They'll post completely off-topic comments, offensive comments, or just downright vulgar and obscene things, and they just really find a lot of fun in this. You have to handle trolls very quickly and consistently, and you have to do this in accordance with your social media policy. And a social media policy basically is something that you post right out front on your social media page and on your website too, that says what kind of behavior you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow on your page, what kind of language you'll have on there, what kind of behavior you won't accept, and what you're going to do if you see that language or behavior on their site, on your site. So you're going to work with your leadership team and your legal team and create your own, because every agency is different. I've seen some law enforcement agencies that will just delete anything they don't like, and some that leave every single thing up, even if I feel like that information might be dangerous. So you're going to have to work with your own team and in legal counsel and figure out what you're going to do, and you've got to abide by that quickly and consistently.
We'll talk a little bit more about social media policies towards the tail end heading into our Q&A session, but this topic of trolls, obviously very timely. And you've done a ton of research, unfortunately born out of some experience you had to go through that we'll cover in a second, but this is really why most of the people are with us here today. So dying to hear your insights on trolls. What motivates them? How do we handle with them? So please share your wisdom with us.
Well, it's important for people to realize when I say troll, I'm not talking about somebody who disagrees with me. Just because you don't like what they're saying doesn't mean they can't say it. Trolls are people who enjoy confusing a message, leading people on. They take pleasure in poking fun at individuals or agencies. That's just what they get their kicks from. And it all boils down in the research I did to something called the online disinhibition effect, which was popularized by the psychologist named John Suler back, I think, in 1980. And it details how social media can expose different sides of people. On the positive side, this online disinhibition effect will take and you probably have friends that are like this, an introverted person that's usually quiet in the office, but then they share really funny, clever stuff on Facebook, or they might share some really thoughtful feedback in a public forum that they might not do in person. But conversely, it can encourage really outrageous opinions in people, and they will say and do things in person or on Facebook that they would never do. The research I read also indicated that trolls think they're funny. They think they're funnier than everybody else. They think they're smarter than everybody else. And sometimes they just troll because they're bored or because it's night and maybe they've had a couple of drinks. And that's why you wake up in the morning and you might have 57 comments on one of your posts. To take down a troll, there are no hard and fast rules, and it's going to be different for different agencies, and sometimes each comment has to be handled differently. So I made this little cheat sheet. This is what I try to refer to when I'm going to respond to something. Thank you, Brian, for your team for making it look a lot prettier than the one that I did. This cheat sheet keeps me from reacting emotionally. It keeps me consistent. It took me some time to research, and I will be very honest and say I got this from lots of different people that are way smarter than me, but I've kind of tweaked it to address our needs. And I kind of mentioned before, I like to take a peek at my troll and see the kind of post he or she makes. Does he have troll friends that I recognize? Does he only write bad reviews? Does he even live in Santa Rosa County? You know, this kind of stuff helps me determine what kind of response I need to give to somebody. So when you're tackling a troll, I kind of use the same skills you do in a social media or in a news conference. Stay on topic, direct any off-topic comments online. Obviously, the holy grail of responding to a troll is to give them the right information and transform them into this advocate for your agency. But that holy grail is very elusive. Like I mentioned before, nobody likes to be corrected in public, even gently. So I always try to take that, like thank them for the feedback and take the conversation offline. Ask them to give me a call at my office or direct them to an FAQ page. That's a good one to do if you're getting a lot of the same kind of comments. But I would say out of all the comments that I've responded with, please contact the Public Information Office in the morning for further information. I've not had the first call. People just, they won't call. They don't want to talk to you in person. They'd rather just make their little comments online. So as I mentioned, work with your legal team to develop the social media policy that's going to detail exactly what the consequences are for any kind of abusive or off-topic comments. But you have to allow your public to exercise their First Amendment rights. So if you don't have a social media policy, get one and get it now. You need to determine, are you going to hide and delete? I've seen some agencies hide and then unhide them later. And make sure that your social media team's all on the same page. So anybody that you have accessing your site knows the rules or knows if they're not sure of that rule to call you. If your decision is to hide or delete a post, you need to do it quickly and only if you have a good archiving service, but do it quickly before people realize that you've done it. That's otherwise, once they start seeing these negative posts, it just starts to spiral out of control. On Facebook, you do have an option to report posts. There's these three little dots in the upper right-hand corner, and you can select find, support, or report comment. Here's on this slide, you can see a selection, but you see that little one at the bottom that says something else. I've clicked into that, and you can get like there's like up to 30, there might even be more different options of what you can support or ask for support for. And I have seen a troll land in Facebook for Facebook jail for 24 hours for getting reported too many times. You can also block words on your page that you don't allow or set your profanity filter to strong, and Facebook will hide these comments for you. That's helpful. That way you can sleep at night. And you always need to consider when you're responding to posts, if you're, besides hiding and deleting, you don't want people to know that you're online at midnight and they're kind of getting to you because they'll enjoy that. And you also don't want somebody to make a comment that, oh, are we paying you overtime to do this kind of stuff? Because that kind of stuff those kind of posts do happen, and I don't think any of us are getting paid overtime to do it. I like to remind people, don't post any potentially contentious topic after 4:30 or on a Friday so that you can have a nice evening and hopefully a nice weekend. Remember, you don't have to answer everything. I don't answer rhetorical comments. While social media is a limited public forum and a great place for healthy debate, some people just want to argue. So I like the old saying, don't wrestle with a pig, you both get dirty and the pig loves it. But in an emergency, you also have to remember it's safety first. If you work in public safety and somebody's commenting something that's potentially dangerous, I would respond to that immediately or delete that immediately. We always tell people to think before they post on our team. And if we post something a little different than we've ever done before, Sarah, my assistant PIO, I ask her all the time, like, how can this go wrong? How can this go up in flames? And that's really helped us. We're very careful when we respond to posts in groups. And you can respond to a post in a group as a page or as yourself, but you think of these groups as like little neighborhood sections, like that's their territory. I only go into a group and respond to a post if it was dangerously incorrect information, and we only do that every now and then. And I would be very, very careful responding with humor. I've seen this done well, and it was pretty funny, and it would feel really good to pull it off, but I personally don't want to be the person that has to stand up in front of 5 county commissioners and explain to them why I thought something was funny, and nobody else did. But one of the best pieces of advice I can give is, as Aristotle says here, the antidote for 50 enemies is one friend. If you have a good, loyal following, they'll come to your support if somebody's posting something disruptive or off topic or offensive. And that's a great way to shut trolls down if your community does it for you. So if you work hard to cultivate a really strong fan base with your public and your employees and your partner agencies, and then be good to them too. Step in and help your partner agencies out when they're getting attacked too. Like we all need to help each other in this process.
So Brandy,
So,
why not just let the haters hate?
okay, there's some really good reasons not to let them do this. To me, public safety is one of the most important things government does, and you need to protect your public. So yes, social media is considered public forum, and just because you don't like it, they can still say it. But if it's dangerously incorrect information, you've got to do something about that. Public safety comes first for our agency. If someone's going to make a post that soaking in Roundup will kill COVID, I'm going to delete that. I will take my chances on getting sued before I will risk the fact that somebody might bathe their kids in weed killer. So there are going to be times when we're going to shut stuff down. What you permit, you promote. Your social media platform can become basically a breeding grounds for trolls if you leave it unmitigated, and it sets the mood for more negative posts, and it can turn your whole page into like anti-social media. I've heard of people leaving some community groups because they say all the posts are so negative. And this hostile environment, it'll turn off your silent majority of public that are supportive of your agency, and then you lose all these great benefits that you have of this fast, cheap, interactive message delivery system that social media offers. If it goes on too long, eventually these trolls can tarnish your whole agency's reputation. And then last but not least, it not only drains energy from you and your social media team, it can affect the morale of your entire organization. We had this failed ballot initiative last year that we took so much heat on. A woman I didn't even know brought us candy and balloons. And that just showed you how much the public saw what was happening to us. It made me feel better, but it's important. You've got to think about the rest of your agency and don't let them get drugged down. I think part of the role of a PIO is to be a cheerleader for your organization. So you need to protect your public, and you also need to protect your own people.
A lot of great words and guidance there, Brandy. And I consider myself an optimist, and I believe there's far more good in the world, but sometimes it gets disproportional online. And some of this you had to learn the hard way. I mentioned up front that your sort of interest in trolls and developing some of these tips and tricks was born out of personal experience. So can you share with the group that's online here? Share your story. What prompted you to become a little bit of a subject matter expert on trolls?
Yeah, thinking back on it, I should actually go thank this guy for it. So Santa Rosa County was targeted last year by this local Facebook satire page. The administrator of the page posted some information about the county that some people thought was funny. He said that we were putting in a topless donut bar or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. However, he used our county seal on the post, and a lot of our residents got really upset. Phones are like blowing up at development services, and development services called me and said, Randy, do something, make it stop. So I corrected the information on our official Facebook page, but I didn't call the guy out because I'm trying, to be careful to let him save face. But that actually made it worse. He ended up referring to me as the pink-haired public official from Santa Rosa County who likes Moscow mules and a cutesy Snapchat filter, which taught me a lesson really quickly there about locking down my privacy settings. And I do see the humor in it now, but it took us issuing him a cease and desist letter from our attorney because of the post that he put up with our county logo and trying to say, that we made a mistake, and that's just dangerous. It's also actually illegal for him to use our county logo like that. So I decided that I would do research on this because I started thinking, if all my peers are dealing with this too, what are they doing? And how many public information officers are actually not even using social media because they're so concerned about what trolls could do. So that's why I researched the psychology behind trolls, and I surveyed 150 PIOs around the county to see how the threat of trolls was affecting their use of social media and what they did to mitigate against that. And it gave me a huge wealth of information. There's no greater resource than your colleagues. I encourage anyone listening to have a network of your peers and share ideas and best practices, because I'll tell you, everything that I've talked about today, I've learned it from somebody else.
That's fantastic, Brandy, and a few resources that for folks to go to. I mean, I'm going to selfishly plug the Archive Social user group for our clients out there, people posting questions and getting advice from their peers. But there's also the government social media Facebook group, GSM. It's another fantastic resource to get information from your peers. And we've talked a lot about sort of how you handle trolls when they're posting comments, and maybe you find yourself in a position where you have to delete a comment, or maybe block somebody off of social media, or maybe hide something or edit something. And the unfortunate reality of all of your job and many of the other communicators out there is that there are also laws that protect the people who are doing those postings. And you also have to be sure you're maintaining compliance along the way. We're seeing it firsthand in our own client base, an increase in record requests that are specifically referencing social media. And it's not just the citizen who is looking for transparency in government. It's the citizen who might be looking for evidence that their First Amendment rights were violated. We also saw an article yesterday where lawsuits around transparency on COVID and coronavirus and Freedom of Information Act requests are happening. So you have a job to be sort of that trusted source of information, the clarifying of misinformation, but at the same time, you got to be maintaining compliance. And just wanted to offer a few perspectives for the folks who are on the webinar today that, the interesting thing about public record law, that in almost every instance, the authors wrote the laws to be future-proofed. So when you read them, and believe me, I've read a lot of them, you'll see that they're designed to focus on content, not format. So a lot of public record laws make the statement of regardless of physical form. That includes social media. By the way, that would also include carrier pigeon or town criers. So no matter what format you're using, it is becoming a public record. So in the early days of public sector social media adoption, many agencies use social media to repost content that appeared elsewhere, like a PDF of a press release or a notice that would have appeared in a newspaper, and it was duplicate content that was already kept elsewhere. So people really didn't think about retaining social media content, but that's clearly no longer the case. What's happening on social media content for agencies is unique original content that is also subject to public commentary. A press release doesn't have the unintended consequence of people responding to it, but all of it's governed by the same public record law that requires you, to keep record of ordinances and school board meetings and development plans and arrests. So as communication has moved away from traditional media onto these private social media networks, public communicators need to adapt their practices and, continue to be good stewards of the records they produce. And it's challenging. I know a lot of folks that are on this webinar might be a team of one, or maybe you're a team of 2 or 3, and maybe social media manager is not the only thing you do for your community. But the unfortunate reality is the networks aren't going to do this for you. Facebook is not subject to public record law. You are. Archive Social did a survey of public communicators earlier this year, had a little over 600 responses to it. Only about a third of the responses were clients of ours, by the way. So the reason why I share that context is nearly 1 in 4 of the people who responded to our survey said they had received a public records request that explicitly referenced social media. So I know a lot of you may not have seen it yet, but it's not a question of if, it's really a question of when. So you really got to realize social media is a public record, and that's where a company like Archive Social can step in. But Brandy made a point earlier also today in the webinar is that your social media is also a limited public forum. So Brandy stressed it a lot about having a social media policy for your community members, one that governs the type of moderation that you do. We are not lawyers, and we may not be the ones closest to how your elected officials want to moderate your specific agency pages. So I'll always stress to speak to your designated legal advisor, but you really should have a community policy that will empower you to moderate and control a lot of these trolls. That same survey that I referenced, if you don't have a policy, you're not alone. It was a little shocking for us that 40% of respondents do not have a social media policy for governing comment moderation. Good news for you is that means 60% do, which means you have plenty of examples to borrow from. We'll also offer you in a moment here a chance to sort of raise your hand. We have some templates and some project guides that can help you build a policy if you don't have one. And then finally, the last thing I sort of want to talk to about maintaining compliance is in addition to public record laws, you can't forget about First Amendment rights. Now, Mark Weaver, I promote him wherever I can. He is an attorney. He is not my attorney or our company's attorney, but he is a prolific poster on his Twitter account of useful information and resources. You may be familiar with him. He's also a featured speaker at many conferences many of us attend. So if you're not following Mark on Twitter, I'll just share that you may be missing out on some fantastic information and reminders. This one in particular was on March 23rd when COVID was starting to really sort of really blossom, and a lot of us were sort of looking to each other for what we were doing and how we were handling comments. He sent out a dutiful reminder to all of us that the First Amendment still applies, even in a pandemic crisis. Now I'm showing you the first thread. It's about a 7 or 8 tweet long thread, but I'm deliberately showing you the first thread and the date as well as his handle, which is at Mark R. Weaver. So you can go and view the full thread in context. It's an incredibly valuable reminder that while you may get frustrated and want to block and delete certain comments, there is a swim lane you have to stay in to make sure you're not inadvertently creating a risk of a First Amendment violation for your constituents. So really, there's 3 steps you can take towards compliance. First, we've said it several times, establish a social media policy. Whether you're just starting out or you already have a robust presence, you need a policy. Then you want to create for people who manage your account a comment moderation guide. And really, a commenting policy is all about balance, because you want to respect relevant opinions and First Amendment concerns, but it should allow you to moderate the inappropriate, irrelevant, and off-topic content, and train your staff or whoever's helping you with that comment moderation so they're following documented policy. And then point 3 is you definitely want to capture, monitor, and retain your social media. Brandy alluded to this. Social media is open 24/7, and no policy you create or no moderator you train is going to be foolproof. And none of you want to work 24 hours a day. So you want to protect your agency by archiving records of every post and comment. And you also want to monitor for key terms and phrases so you can quickly resolve those that matter. So really 3 steps you can take towards compliance. And we're going to be moving here in just a second into some questions that were submitted. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll. Now the poll I'm going to be launching, I'm going to leave on the screen while Brandy and I answer some of your submitted questions. But I want to be clear on this poll. This poll is going to be asking you if you'd like to be contacted in order to receive some additional information about archiving social media, better understand compliance requirements, or discuss what some of those policy options might be. And then the last one, of course, is for all of the above. And then after today's webinar, a member from Archive Social will be following up. And I want to be very clear, the 1-page cheat sheet for comment response, you're already going to get that. Brandy was kind enough to allow us to distribute it to all attendees. You will also get the slides and a copy of today's presentation. So Brandy, we got, as I mentioned, over 60 questions and a few questions submitted live here. If you don't mind, I'd like to jump into some of these questions and get your take on some of them. The first one is, we've alluded to sort of the wear and tear of the job on communicators. And, at the end of the day, how do you guys decompress if you dealt all day with trolls, specifically after maybe a contentious post? How do you avoid burnout? And, do you find it hard to disconnect knowing that social media is 24/7?
Yeah, so one day last year, back when this failed ballot initiative was going off, um, I walked into my assistant's office and I'm like, what are you doing this afternoon? And she's like, I have no plans. And I said, great, we're going axe throwing. Which is awesome because they let you throw axes and drink, which that seems like an odd combination, but it worked out really well for us. We started out naming each of the axe throws either for someone who'd been especially awful to us on Facebook or maybe a particular group that it actually formed just to hate us. And got a lot of energy out with that. But by the end, the kind of cool thing was we ended up naming our throws in honor of our supporters and nice things like the lady that brought us the balloon and the candies. So we turned it around. I've also gone to the shooting range a few times. Sometimes I run. Sometimes I read the post on GSMCon's Facebook group because that's kind of like therapy, and I realize it could be way, way worse. I've really cut back on my personal social media. If you look at my Facebook page, if you're a friend of mine, you'll see most of the stuff that I post is really just county stuff I'm sharing. I'm a little more relaxed on Instagram, and I really let loose on Snapchat, but I'm very careful about who I'm friends with on Snapchat.
I can understand that. And I love the fact that you name the axes after your trolls. I think that's whether you want to throw axes or just throw paper against the wall or just shout their name into the ether, not a bad tactic whatsoever. So, it's an unfortunate reality of social media. Like we said, you get critics, you get haters, you get trolls. So for a public communicator and a public agency, should they just limit their social media where no one can comment? Just turn off comments. Any thoughts on limiting social media to no one commenting?
Well, I know that you have the option to turn off some comments in a post on groups, but we don't really manage that many groups. We have 17 pages, and Facebook is our most common platform here. You can't make a post on Facebook that doesn't allow for comments. There's a time and a place, though, for using platforms that do allow you to turn off commentings. Not all messages need to be delivered on social media that can invite a whole lot of moderation and make a real drain on your office. So we, from the very beginning, have not turned on comments for Nextdoor because we only post stuff to Nextdoor during extreme emergencies, and we don't have the manpower to be moderating all the comment on 6 or 7 Facebook pages and Nextdoor and Twitter. So Nextdoor is one that's just simply a push mechanism for us. We send emails out. We have a pretty healthy subscriber list there. We might do a radio show or push messaging out through our website. It's not everything needs to be in an area where people comment back. Some stuff just doesn't have to be on Facebook. So that's kind of been our approach with that.
I appreciate that. And I think the only thing I would add to this is social media, like we said, is a double-edged sword. You get some great, wonderful, positive engagement, and the idea of not allowing people to comment, I think, is shutting down probably a much more powerful voice on social media, which is those of the fans and the supporters. And sometimes, to your point, the community also can self-monitor. Sometimes there's questions people ask and a friendly neighbor handles it versus taking the burden off of you. So we've always encouraged people to leverage social media for what it's for, which is to drive engagement and interaction with your community. And Brandy, there's a lot going on outside of COVID. There's also things going on with protests and curfews, and it's increased the intensity level of a lot of stuff that's happening online. And even more so, I think, for those who might be in workforce development. And we had somebody attend who submitted the question of having an experience of a lot of angry people flooding their personal email and their personal social accounts. I know this can also happen to teachers quite often after seeing their name on maybe a press release. Do you have any suggestions for how people can separate their business and personal online identities to avoid trolling while they're not working? How do they get away from it?
I've seen some PIOs set up a business like Brandy Bates PIO Facebook page versus just a regular Brandy Bates page or something. I don't I don't like that idea. I don't do it that way. Like I said, after I was picked on a little bit by that satire site, I tightened up my Facebook account and my Instagram account. So you have to request to follow me on either of those, and I'll check them out before I friend them. I don't let people tag me in pictures or posts without my approval. I don't let people post on my page except on my birthday. So you just, I lock that kind of stuff down. I mean, public trust isn't as healthy as it once was by the people, and sometimes people can just get really, really personal and take it out on you. So I lock my accounts down pretty well.
Uh, Great advice. Now you're in Florida, so obviously, how do sunshine laws and open government fit into this all practice of troll moderation?
Well, sunshine law and public records law, which in Florida is pretty strict compared to other states, it's they're designed to guarantee the public has access to public records, meaning that and meetings are publicly advertised and open to all, and that agenda items aren't discussed by elected officials outside of sunshine. And our commissioners know not to comment online on each other's posts about things that they're going to vote on. They're counseled by our county attorney for that. They don't typically voice how they're going to vote on something in advance of a meeting or anything, that would be stepping outside that line. But social media, as far as open government, it's a great place for promoting transparency of upcoming meetings, the agendas for those meetings, so that your people are well aware of what's going to be discussed and they have the opportunity to get involved. If there's an item we want public feedback on before a meeting, or we want to offer people the opportunity to give feedback in lieu of attending a meeting, we typically direct them to an email address or a comment form or a survey, so we have an official response of that, an official record there. As far as open government goes, like I said, it's a great way to show your transparency by linking to board meeting broadcasts or minutes of meetings, results of those surveys and documents. It's that way people don't have to go to your website and go rooting through to find something. You can serve it up to them if it's a topic that's been coming up a lot on social media. So, but I always like to have a good archiving service so you can research your posts quickly if you have a public records request, and accurately, so that you can get all of the posts together if needed. I've not had a public records request of social media, but I will say that it's been a great service for us when we are tracking posts, when we're asked to give reports back of how many posts did we do about the 5 Mile Swamp Fire, how many posts have we done about flooding. So it's a great way to make a report about posts that you've done on social media, rather than having to go back by hand and read through them all.
Yeah, and in full transparency for the folks attending today's webinar, Brandy is in Santa Rosa County, is a client of Archive Socials. Brandy and I met because she did a brief webinar training session for a totally different third party that I happened to come across, and I thought the topic was great, so I reached out. And Brandy, to your point, you've done some stuff with our archive just to make your life easier in terms of just communicating up the chain on some of the work you guys have been doing on specific comments and threads. And it's not just about public record requests, although it is a compliance tool. It's also about just making your life easier overall for reporting, sorting, searching, and e-discovery. And
Yeah.
We've talked about Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and we had a question that honestly, sounds like I don't know if I was the best person to answer it. Maybe you can, which is, how do you navigate Facebook Live trolls? That's a much different use of Facebook. Any thoughts for navigating Facebook Live?
Well, we've not had any trolls on Facebook Live, because typically the Facebook Live events we've done is we're talking about a storm, or we're on site at a COVID testing scene, or at a food drive. and they've not been the kind of posts that typically would attract trolls. I'm fortunate there's 2.5 people in my office, so I could potentially have a staff member with a laptop monitoring the comments and responding in accordance with our social media policy. Or you could just, if you see a troll comment pop up, you can ignore it and go back after the Facebook Live and moderate it later. We have decided against doing Facebook Live on a few things and opting instead to shoot a video and post it later because we were concerned about trolls.
Great advice there. I know in the interest of time, we'll probably handle 1 or 2 more questions here, but I thought this was a great question, which is, sometimes we say people are trolls because what they're saying is, hurtful and false, but what if what they're saying is true? What if they are highlighting some of the things that your agency or your community isn't really proud of? So what would we do if what they're saying is true and we're not proud of? And then on the flip side of that, I wouldn't mind hearing, now what if what they're saying is absolutely 100% inaccurate and candidly a big fat lie?
Yeah, sometimes some of the stuff they say is true, and you may not be especially proud of it. I had this great instructor, Dr. Joe Trahan at FEMA, who one thing he taught us was go ugly fast. So if you mess up, say that you messed up, but also follow that up with, yes, this is true, and this is exactly what happened, but here's what we're going to do to correct it, and here's what we're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then encourage people to call you if they have any questions or the subject matter expert, and then take the conversation offline. Just go ugly fast, get it out there. And yeah, and you're opening yourself up to some heat when you do that, but at least you're being transparent about it. And like I mentioned before, we like to think in every way of how a post can go bad before we publish it, and not every message needs to be delivered on social media. So, maybe that's going to be something that you address in more detail through a news release. That's why we have a website, and we have a fairly robust email subscribership, and we have some awesome media in our community that are great at helping getting our messages out. If it's a big fat lie, if somebody accuses one of our commissioners of something that is completely illegal and attempting to defame them, that's libel, and we can delete libel per our social media policy. If they have proof that somebody is doing something, they need to take that up with the state attorney's office. If it's dangerously wrong information and intended to mislead people, our policy dictates that we can delete that. So it all goes back to the social media policy that your elected officials and your legal team have signed off on.
That's great. It actually dovetails into the last question, and I'll take a swing at this one, Brandy, and then I'll let you kind of wrap up with some closing thoughts. But how do you handle these inappropriate comments while not violating the free speech rights? And we've touched on it a couple times, but I felt like that question came in that it was worth as a follow-up to this last one, so sort of hitting it on it again. First thing that you want to do that, and I think it's really important for agencies to know this, that from the perspective of a First Amendment violation, there really is little or no difference between deleting a comment or hiding a comment, because in either case, it's limiting a citizen's right to share their viewpoint. So some federal court decisions have specifically held that a person commenting on social media has a First Amendment right to have their speech seen by others. So hiding versus deleting in some cases are viewed as one and the same. It's why it's so important that you have that social media policy and you gain your legal advisor's opinion, because there are a few narrow categories of speech that have no First Amendment protection. So you have free and clear, even without a policy, to handle those types of trolls. And again, work with your agency counsel. But if someone makes an actual threat, that has no First Amendment protection. If someone is doing defamation that Brandy kind of alluded to, now notice that if you make a statement of opinion, like I think Brandy is the worst PIO in Florida, That's not really technically defamation. By the way, it's also a big fat lie. Generally, defamation is a false assertion of a fact that could damage a reputation. And copyright violation is another one that has no First Amendment violation. Suggesting somebody does something illegally. So, hey, I think we should all do this. There is not a First Amendment protection to encourage illegal behavior. And then obscenity. There is no First Amendment protection against obscenity. And of course, also like off topic or links to selling stuff and malware. Again, you want to make sure that you consult your agency's counsel, but hopefully we've given you enough advice and guidance here with some of these questions. And I want to keep everybody to our promise of not to end after 4 o'clock Eastern time here for us. So Brandy, I want to give you an opportunity to have some closing thoughts.
Yes, so social media is constantly evolving. You have to make a commitment to be constantly learning. There's always new tools coming out to help you with moderation. You need to stay updated with these latest tools. Constantly be networking with your other social media managers. You might need them in an event. You might want to set up some virtual assistance. Take advantage of webinars and trainings like this. And if you like what I said, that's great. Use it. If you don't like it, that's okay. Email me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Attending conferences like National Information Officers Association, National Association of Government Communicators, and then I think I mentioned the GSMCon Facebook page, Government Social Media LLC. Those are all great. And I know there's more that I'm not mentioning, and I don't mean to leave them out. But trolls are here to stay. I don't think we're going to see that ever go away. And social media is obviously one of the best tools that we have yet for disseminating information quickly and cheaply. So invest in the training and the resources that you need to do it well.
Well, thank you so much, Brandy. I appreciated you dedicating not only so much time, but experience and insight in answering some of these questions. And to all our attendees, I'd like to thank you. And again, one last reminder, you will get a copy of the slides, a recording, and Brandy's comment and response cheat sheet as sort of a thank you for attending. And we encourage you to sort of share those resources to those that may not have been able to attend. So at this point, we're going to wrap up with 2 minutes to spare. And thank you all very much. And thank you, Brandy. And Archive Social appreciates all of you and all you guys do to keep our communities both informed and safe. Thank you all very much. Have a great balance to your day.